At the end of the Japanese occupation of the Korean peninsula in 1945, the Japanese test site suddenly received an order from the high-ups to evacuate. Then the officer gave the order to burn it. The prisoners were shot and killed. They were thrown into a pit and doused with gasoline. After waiting for the officers to take away a few test tubes containing experiments, soldiers began laying explosives throughout the laboratory building. The soldier who was in charge of lighting the fires was so frightened to see that the iron door had been hammered out of several holes by the creatures behind it. They were so scared, they couldn't even strike a match. With the successful ignition, the power of the explosives and the gasoline leveled the entire lab, but it was still dark before the dawn. Ishikawa, the Japanese, was the master of the capital, but even the printing of newspapers is strictly controlled. A father and his daughter set foot on this land. Her kind father bought a newspaper and gave the paperboy some pocket money. In return, the paperboy gave him a small newspaper. He thought it was real news. It was the news that the Japanese had detonated the lab, and the next moment, the city police arrested the people who distributed the tabloid and labeled them as reactionaries. Eventually, these people had to be beaten. Then they were forced to kneel in the street and sign an agreement to visit the Yasukuni shrine. However, one of those arrested was the most unjust. Tae-sang, the owner of the capital's largest pawnshop, had 3 encounters with Ishikawa's wife over a porcelain deal. He was then arrested and taken to the police station, where he was beaten in the electric chair. Ishikawa accused Tae-sang of having an affair with his wife. After being abused, Tae-sang also came to his senses. Ishikawa was obviously after something else. After explaining everything, Ishikawa took out a photo of the geisha Akiko. This is his old flame. She's been missing for a week. Ishikawa had searched the capital but couldn't find her. On the surface, Tae-sang is a big boss. Behind the scenes, he's a know-it-all, because he has a lot of connections. He's well informed in the capital. So Ishikawa asked Tae-sang to help him find a woman. The deadline is when the cherry blossoms fall. Otherwise, Tae-sang would lose all his properties in the capital. Tae-sang's head felt numb. He returned to the pawnshop with bruises. He was ready to ask his sister to sell his properties, but looking at the guards outside the window, Tae-sang realized that he could only do it in private. Now the cherry blossoms are in full bloom. It's only a month before they fade at the latest. Tae-sang could only pretend for a while. He pretended to send someone to look for them. Instead, he asked his sister to secretly sell all the treasures in the pawnshop. But Tae-sang realized that there was not only Ishikawa's spy outside, there was also a strange man. Tae-sang didn't know what kind of person he was. He decided to find a chance to find out. At that time, there were many cases of missing women in the capital. They were secretly captured by the Japanese and locked into prison cells. Akiko was among them. She followed the instructions of others. When she saw the Japanese soldiers coming, she knelt down by the cell door. At that moment, the Japanese selected 2 women according to the scientists' instructions. One of them was crying and begging for mercy. The other had a scarred face and an apathetic countenance. They were placed in 2 separate prisons next to each other. In front of them was a plate of buns and a bowl of water. Hungry for a long time, they quickly grabbed the buns and stuffed them into their mouths. Soon they felt very thirsty. They grabbed a bowl of water and drank from it, but they didn't know that the water had been filled with the evil parasites that the Japanese were researching. The woman drank the water with the parasite in it. She got a headache and hit the wall. Seeing her strong reaction to the parasite, the Japanese officer even refused to inject her with the serum. The woman in the cell next to her was in pain. She crouched in the corner and didn't say a word. The officer saw that she could still keep her wits about her. He was very satisfied with that, so he decided to inject the subject with the serum. Meanwhile, Tae-sang was trying to find out what kind of people were watching from the other side. He went straight to Ishikawa's spy. He asked him to take him to a restaurant. Tae-sang gave him a bunch of money as a token of his appreciation. While the spy was gloating, he didn't know that Tae-sang had gone out the back door of the hotel. He purposely led the stalker to the intersection of the paths. Then Tae-sang raised his pistol and asked for his identity. The stalker was not afraid. He pulled out a dagger and attacked him. During the fight, Tae-sang knocked her hat off, only to realize that she is a woman. The woman was furious. She and Tae-sang fought each other with their own weapons. In the end, Tae-sang withdrew his pistol. The woman explained why she was there. She found out that Tae-sang was a know-it-all. She asked him to find a painter named Sakamoto. When Tae-sang heard it was a nobody, he didn't think it was worthwhile. He didn't want to help. Then the woman told him the truth. She was looking for her mother. But Tae-sang thought it's been 10 years. The woman's mother might have started a new family. Now the woman saw through Tae-sang's behavior. Tae-sang looked at the woman's angry face, but his heart was pounding in his chest. He couldn't help but praise her beautiful eyes. She was so angry that she ran away, but he didn't realize that they would meet again soon. Through an acquaintance, she found out about a detective who was good at finding people, so she paid for the father and daughter to meet Tae-sang. Tae-sang realized the woman's name was Chi-wo. When Chi-wo saw it was him, she didn't want to take the job, but when Tae-sang found out that the father and daughter had completed 140 out of 200 assignments, even the bodies were recovered. Tae-sang mentioned Sakamoto. He promised to help Chi-wo find her mother. Now both parties are barely in harmony. That night, Sakamoto, the artist they were both looking for, was called by a Japanese officer to his cell to paint a portrait of room 2. He had the courage to turn on his flashlight and look inside. He saw a bloodstain and a corpse. Sakamoto followed the bloody handprints and looked up to see the top, but he was so scared, he fell on his butt. A year ago, Sakamoto reported to the hospital in the capital. With a dream in his heart, he saw the bloodshed and cruelty of his countrymen. Sakamoto witnessed an autopsy on a living person, but he couldn't help vomiting. But the doctor forced Sakamoto back to the scene despite his pain. Afterwards, Sakamoto hid in a corner and cried. The cleaning lady was kind enough to comfort him, now that they met here. But this is what happened. Sakamoto fell to the ground in fear of the monster's elongated arm. When he realized that he wanted to make sure, the monster took out the cherry blossom necklace. Apparently what she did just now was a cry for help. Maybe it's a mother-daughter bond. Chi-wo only felt uneasy, but she didn't know that her mother had suffered so much. She was out for a walk at night, suddenly saw the cherry blossoms in full bloom, so she decided to do something serious. So she sneaked into Ishikawa's yard. She found his wife secretly communicating with a man. When the man left in a rickshaw, Chi-wo hurriedly chased after him, until he arrived at his destination. He bowed respectfully. Chi-wo memorized the location. Clueless Tae-sang arrived at the store to find the Japanese causing trouble. He took the night pot he bought for $100. He insisted that it was white porcelain, then he tried to force him to pawn it. Tae-sang didn't care about this kind of poser. He asked him to go to the police station, but he didn't expect the Japanese to use a knife at the drop of a hat. Tae-sang's brother and sister took out their guns as a deterrent. Now the Japanese were completely cowed. They left with their tails between their legs. Chi-wo brought good news to Tae-sang. She found the rickshaw driver that Akiko was traveling in before she disappeared. Chi-wo was able to extract a confession from the rickshaw driver, and found out that Akiko disappeared to Gyeongseong Hospital, and the people who can get into this hospital are all rich and famous. Akiko is just a lowly geisha. She's not qualified to go in at all. Chi-wo thought there was a hidden agenda, so she wanted Tae-sang to use his contacts to help her get into Gyeongseong Hospital to find out what's going on. Of course, it's just a matter of money. Tae-sang exchanged a sum of money for a rich kid's ID card. The father and daughter got dressed up and rode into the hospital with Tae-sang. In order to understand the situation, Chi-wo decided to sneak into the data room to check it out. Suddenly, the kid screamed in pain and lay on the floor with his stomach covered. The hospital and nurses gathered around to check on him. Chi-wo took the opportunity to hide in the data room and read through the data, but she was followed by a cleaner. Chi-wo couldn't pretend anymore. She told him that North Koreans don't sell to North Koreans, but the janitor was still asking questions, until Chi-wo's father showed up with a gun. The janitor showed his hand signals. Apparently, he's a revolutionary. After confirming that they were on the same page, the father and daughter left the data room one by one. It was only then that little brother avoided the fate of being injected. Tae-sang praised the doctor's skill with his suddenly revitalized little brother. Then he went downstairs to join the father and daughter. Suddenly a gunshot came. Nurse rushed to calm everyone, saying that it was the sound of the army practicing in the neighborhood. But Chi-wo knew it was coming from underground, so she suggested that they change the direction of the investigation. At the same time, the basement is in chaos. The monster's tentacles started killing Japanese soldiers. The gunshot was to stop the monster. A tentacle came quickly, slowly dragged the Japanese soldier, who couldn't break away to its side. It's a monster developed by the Japanese army. Only saw a tentacle sticking out. It sucked the soldier's head, and sucked blood from his body. Such a shocking scene. The Japanese officer was marveling at the goddess' arrival. In order not to hurt her, the officer asked the soldiers to bring liquid nitrogen to freeze the monster. and transport her to another place. At this time, the secret agent changed into clothes that were easy to move around in. They decided to find out the secret of the hospital tonight under the guidance of the cleaner. Tae-sang had to say goodbye to them. After leaving the hospital, he was worried about Chi-woo's safety. When she found out what Tae-sang was thinking, he denied it. Tae-sang then told his stalker about the painter. He told him to call Ishikawa to help find him. He even lied that he was the man involved in Akiko's disappearance. However, this night was not a quiet one at the hospital. The monster, frozen in liquid nitrogen, tried to protect itself. The monster released many anthrax spores. Soldiers with gas masks locked the monster in a cage. Wherever they went, the air was filled with spores. Captives didn't know that. They watched as the spores melted into their hands, thought they were snowflakes, but within moments, there were screams from the cells. Anthrax began to spread through the body. A large area of necrotic skin. People died in agonizing pain. Chi-woo and the others witnessed a large number of corpses being thrown out from a high place. The next day, news of an unknown infection at the hospital spread through the streets. The location of the hospital was blocked off from all sides. A nurse who escaped risked her life to deliver a note to Tae-sang saying that she found Akiko. The nurse found out that a lot of people died in the hospital. When he found out that the detective hadn't come out yet, Tae-sang was completely dismayed, immediately decided to return to the hospital. Wherever the anthrax spores went, there were no survivors. The Japanese army piled up the corpses like garbage. The car transporting the monster suddenly got stuck in the door. In order to allow the vehicle to pass, the soldiers pulled the cage through with great force, but the liquid nitrogen switch was accidentally turned off. When he was about to take the monster to the elevator, the soldier suddenly realized that there were no more spores scattered around. In the next moment, the major realized the crisis. But it was too late. The soldier who was talking just now had a big hole in his chest pierced by a tentacle. Then the monster woke up, broke free from the cage and started to kill. The major survived everything. He ordered the surviving soldiers to help close the elevator doors. The soldiers were threatened with death, so they did it. The next moment, the monsters dragged him away because of the noise he made. When the major saw this, he smashed the soldier's hand on the door frame. While the monster was dragging the soldier away, the major got up and closed the door. He thought he was saved, but his body was quickly penetrated by the tentacles. Luckily, the major was able to shoot in time. He was able to save his life. At that moment, the dean took the officer to the elevator where the monster was being held. Showing the results of their training, 3 blindfolded prisoners were brought into the monster's habitat. Then the dean rang a bell. The monsters started attacking the 3 of them in a frenzy. The dean proudly said that he would soon be able to tame the monster. But will he really be able to do so? The child pulls back his sleeve to reveal an arm full of needle holes. This is evidence of the Japanese army's human experimentation. Chi-woo realized that if she didn't help, the children would be tortured to death by the disease. But because of her weakness, she saved 4 children, which led to the extension of the program. The army soon discovered the children's disappearance, and through the doctor's severed aorta, with such skill, the Japanese army realized that the Koreans had broken in. They immediately intensified their search. At this point, Tae-sang chose to compromise. The group pushed the 4 children to the drawing room for temporary shelter. Suddenly, a little girl's scream was heard by a private. In order not to alarm the enemy, the private didn't break in. Tae-sang realized that the girl was scared by the paintings in the room. Chi-woo went inside. She was curious about Sakamoto's work. It was only then that Tae-sang admitted that the man in front of her was the Sakamoto she was looking for. Chi-woo hurriedly took out her mother's portrait, saying it was her long-lost mother. When Sakamoto saw the portrait, he insisted that he didn't know where she was. He could not do to inform a daughter so cruel news. At this time, the monster not far away still retained human intelligence. She quickly learned to ride the elevator. Then she began to kill. The Japanese heard gunfire and thought it was an intruder and rushed to support them. But they didn't realize it was the monster's backlash. Many Japanese soldiers were sacrificed. One of the Japanese soldiers noticed that the wire mesh of the ventilation ducts had been tampered with, so he tried to follow them. The group had just arrived at the human body lab. They were shocked by the human tissue in the tanks. Considering that the Japanese soldiers had suddenly stepped up their guard, they decided to hide in the laundry room. At that time, Tae-sang became weaker and slower because of his wounds. Chi-woo soon realized that something was wrong, but Tae-sang used a broken ankle as an excuse. But when he was the last to arrive at the laundry, the Japanese soldiers came after him. Tae-sang. Under the threat of gunfire, he was forced to surrender his pistol. Chi-wo seized the opportunity to grab the gun, but she was knocked to the ground by the Japanese soldiers. Seeing his beloved woman suffer, Tae-sang showed his true strength. He killed the Japanese soldier in the dirty clothes basket. After temporarily relieving the crisis, Tae-sang's wound was torn open as a result. Chi-wo helped to bandage it. Father decided to separate the two to increase efficiency. Tae-sang set out again, but he met his mother-in-law who turned into a monster.